Hi guys, and welcome to my review of the KZ EDXs. This is the latest single DD in a never-ending line of single DDs that KZ has gotten us used to since last year. Ever since the CRA, the original one, came out, it's been just a non-stop of DD launches and yes, with some evolutions, some devolutions, but it's been a constant flood of single DDs. Anyway, before I get to the EDXs, let me just set the stage here so that we position ourselves properly and know exactly what he's talking about. I'm going to start this timeline with the CCA CXS. This was, until its launch, probably the best one. We had the CCA Lyra before that, but the CXS was probably the best one. And it still holds its own today, and it's still a better buy than the EDXs. There, I've said it. It is a nicely tuned IEM. It resolved some of the issues that the Lyra had in that ever continual search for a balance between the bass and the mids. Where the EDA balanced, it was done with the bass being more prominent. Then in the Lyra they gave the mids more prominence, more evidence, and kind of subdued the bass slightly. And then with the CRA and the Plus and the EDX Ultra, they also tried to play around a little bit with that balance. But then the one that ultimately came out on top and was the best was this one here. It was the first one that had kind of an almost unusual plateau for KZ in terms of the frequencies between let's say 1.5 and 8K, with very, very small minute peaks. So it was basically flat, and it sounds great. It sounds great. It's got that KZ signature, and it sounds good. The driver that famous driver that is based on the XUN, on the original XUN and its various evolutions of that driver, is very well implemented, and it plays really well. After this, they came out with the DQS, which was basically using the shell of the DQ6, and this was a step backwards, definitely a step backwards. It was too much bass, an unnecessary dip there at around, well, not unnecessary, but that dip at around 5-6K shut down things a little bit. Not too much extension past 10, so it was kind of a little bit of a thick. It was bouncy, it was fun and so on, but it no way was it even as comparable in terms of overall performance to the CXS. Then they came out with the ZVX, and this was again using a shell which was like kind of with a hole, as you can see there, supposedly vented or a semi-vented rear faceplate, so a semi-vented implementation. Nice bass, and that the way the pinner game was done, and then everything past that was just flawless. Now recently they came out with the DFI, which comes with, this is basically a Shine, a Joy Audio Shine shell, with the switches and so on and so forth. And they have two versions. They have the ones with the switch and the one without the switch. The one without the switch is in essence a ZVX. It's basically that. The difference that exists, if it exists, honestly, and I've spent countless hours comparing, I can't pick up on it. So you can't really go wrong with either one of them. The difference here is only the shell. Ultimately, I still think the shell of the ZVX will be more comfortable, but in terms of sound, it's very similar. There's just a little bit less energy in the mids and upper mids here than there is here, but it's very minimal. Driver variance will be suffice to cover that. But anyway, those two are very similar. This one, with the switches, basically messed around with the bass levels, and although it was an interesting implementation of Zobel networks, which was also present in the ZVX, by the way, and with all the benefits that those kind of networks bring in terms of maintaining a more stable impedance curve and thus with that doing away with certain peaks. The truth is, yes, it is nice, yes, it sounds good, but ultimately it kind of loses a little bit of that KZ magic, because all the settings are relatively lean in the bass, for the exception of the one which all the switches are on except for the last one, which is 0. So it's 1 1 1 0, and even then the bass is still lower than it is on the ZVX. You don't perceive as much bass, and I don't know, I like it. I guess if you are to look at it, as I mentioned, in terms of the mature tuning, definitely a very mature tuning for KZ, definitely something which is not what we would expect from KZ, but it was ultimately not my cup of tea, although I do recognize its qualities and its its reason of being. My heart still bends towards the ZVX and the DFI without the switches. I would choose these two easily. I would choose a CXS, to be honest, over the switched DFI. And now they launched the EDXs, and the EDXs, it's not the bass that's the issue. It's not the mids that's the issue, honestly, because the tuning of these two is very, very similar. The difference that exists basically in that aspect is where here we have a dip at 5-6K, here we have a peak, but because of the bass and the way it's, the warm character sound of the tuning, you don't really notice that peak. The problem here is that it's got nothing past 6-7K, let's say past 8K. It shuts down completely, so there's no sparkles, there's no nothing. I guess, yes, you could find the reason for it being or existing would be for someone that would want, or that is not very fond of treble. Yes, I guess you could say that person will find this IM engaging. It is supposedly an open back, let me see if I can focus, supposedly an open back design, as you can see there. You can just make out the driver. Honestly, the EDXs does not give me anything that I cannot get from the CXS and better, or that I cannot get from the DFI non-switch or from the ZVX. It lacks way too much, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. It shuts down too much the upper frequencies, the upper mids and the treble. It shuts down those areas too much for it to be correct sounding in any way. None of these are aggressive in that part of the spectrum, none of it. It's just various grades of bass that interact with that part of the upper, of the mids and upper mids. Basically what happens with all of these IEMs is, from above, let's say 1.5K, they almost kind of all the same. A little bit of variance, but they're all the same. It's how the bass interacts with that, how the tuning of the bass is done. All of that is what dictates then how the mids would come across, the vocals will come across, instruments will come across, will dictate the tonal balance, the timbre, the tonality, ultimately some of the technicalities as well. And honestly, no. I've also got here the SimGot, the EW100, because some people kind of, when I did the review for this, were asking me, but why didn't you have, or didn't include some KZs and so on and so forth? Well, it just didn't occur to me, to be honest. Comparing the EW100P, which is supposedly an IM that is tuned in, again, a more mature manner along the lines of the DFI switched version, this, for example, is better than the DFI with the switches. The DFI in that setting that it's now, which is the one with the most bass, does not have the same kind of bass that I can get out of the EW. The EW, not being a bass monster, is still a much more satisfying and much more engaging and much more fuller sounding IM in terms of the bass than the DFI switched version. And also in terms of the extension, it's got more polish in that extension past 8K than what the DFI does have. not detracting any value from the DFI, mind you. I'm not. Obviously, the quality of construction of the DFI speaks for itself. I mean, it's a solidly built IM, built like a Panzerwagen. This whole thing, you can step on it, nothing's gonna happen. While this looks flimsy by comparison, but ultimately the way that it's been tuned and the driver quality used here in the EW100 is better than on the KZ, and that's why this is a better IM. So yeah, guys, there you have it. EDXs, in my opinion, is a pass. Doesn't really make any sense. Out of the older ones, if you have a CXS, honestly, for me, the upgrade of that, I guess you could go for ZVX or the DFI without the switches, to be honest. The DQS was a pass. The EDXs is a pass. The DFI switched version will not be a pass for those that want to play around with the switches a little bit, although they will quickly discover that once you found that position, and I'm sure it will be the 1110, because the bass is just way too lean in the others. You won't do anything. You won't play around with it anymore, and you'll just leave it as it is. So yeah, guys, that's it. I'll show you another graphs, and we'll take it from there. All right, you take care now. Bye-bye. Hi guys, welcome to the graphs for the KZ EDXs. Let's just start away and get this done over with quickly. Okay, that's the graph of the EDXs. Very typical V-shaped signature, really full on the bass. It's not the pin again here, it's just that little peak there at 5 that maybe is a little bit problematic, and then it just falls off past 6, and it just shuts down the IM. I at least don't notice that extension there. Let's start comparing it straight away. I'll compare it with the DQS. Same bass, okay. Very similar here. The DQS has got a dip though at 5K, so you don't notice any possible sibilance, although you don't really pick up on it because of the amount of bass you have. But then it does have a little bit extra extension, so it doesn't sound as closed down, okay. So that's that out of the way. The next one is the CCA CXS, which I still consider to be one of the better ones. And I think it's self-explanatory, although you got, yes, big bass, and pin again is well done, maintains itself pretty flat, and nice extension past 10K. So it's decent extension there. It's fine. It sounds fine. It sounds really nice, the CXS. Okay, next one, the ZVX, number 4. The ZVX has got slightly less bass than the CXS or the EDXs. Slightly less bass, but it's a better well done, better executed bass. I mean, by 200 Hz it's practically flat. Actually, let me just take away the other two so you guys can see it better. It's practically flat. Nice pin again. This is using the wide bore tip, okay. Peaks at 2.6 roughly. Nice and smooth drop off. Peaks at 8 again, and then nice extension. I mean, really, honestly, a really nice curve, and it sounds really nice. The DIF with the switches in the 1110 position, which is honestly the only position I think is worthwhile. Apparently it seems like it's got the same kind of bass as the ZVX, but no, it doesn't. It's a thinner sounding bass. The mids are very well done, same peak, and it's got a little bit less extension as well. By contrast, the non-switch version, which is this one that I'm going to show now, has got a little bit more bass than the ZVX, basically the same mids and basically the same kind of extension. So very similar. You just notice a little bit extra thickness in the bass sound. Okay, and yeah, that's basically it, guys. I mean, just recap here: ZVX, the green line. The blue line is the DFI non-switch version. The red line is the DFI with the switches in the 111 position, which is the one that actually gives it some bass, because if it's not in this position, it sounds way leaner than what you're seeing here. The EDXs is this one here, so it's got kind of the same bass as you get on the DIF non-switch version. But then it's got no extension, and it's just a little bit more messy over there in that 5K peak, and so it doesn't really make sense for me. The CXS, I already took it out. Oh, as I was mentioned, the SIMGOT EW100P. That's the, okay. And where is it? Okay, so let me just take out everyone except for the DFI. Okay, that's the DFI with the switch in that 1110 position, and this is the SIMGOT. Okay, trust me, there's no it's not comparable. The SIMGOT is a better sounding IM, better technicalities, more 3D, everything. It's a better sounding IM, and it's got, although graphically it seems like it's got the same bass, no, the bass sounds fuller. It sounds more meatier. Okay, peaks at 3 and then slowly drops off. Very nicely tuned. I mean, the SIMGOT honestly is a very nicely tuned IM and plays really well. It deserves the title that I gave it of probably the best IM under $20. It definitely deserves it. Anyway guys, as always, like and subscribe. Any questions you might have, please feel free to ask and I'll do my best to answer. All right, you take care now. Bye bye.